Oh no, that... Jake sneered at his brother, relishing the fact that it was finally his turn to bear the brunt of their grandfather's disappointment. Jared, of all the women you could have in New York City, you want Olivia Johnson? Are you crazy, or do you have ulterior motives? Jake needled him, hinting at his belief that Jared was working to take him down as the heir to lead the Nevin family. Grandpa Jacob looked at Jared with wounded eyes. What else do you have to say for yourself, Jared? You are such a smart, motivated young man who has always been a good grandson. At those words, Jake rolled his eyes, but their grandfather continued. But today, I'm disappointed in you. No matter what your reason, I hate to see you have any sort of relationship with Andrew Park's granddaughter. That's the last thing I wanted to hear. Jared's heart broke at the pain he saw on Grandpa Jacob's face. He did not know it, but his grandfather had been seriously considering entrusting the future of his family to Jared. But this whole incident had made him hesitant for the first time since he had thought of it. Whether Jared was dating Olivia, or if he were developing a more strategic relationship like Jake had assumed, Grandpa Jacob was staunchly against any kind of fraternization with Andrew Park's granddaughter. Jacob Nevin knew that Jared was smart, but the smarter a person was, the more ambitious they could be. The more ambitious they were, the easier it would be for them to be tempted to take the wrong path. Grandpa Jacob shook his head. He wondered why Jared had to make a mistake at such a delicate moment. After all, Jacob was at the end of his life as he was forced to make such important decisions. He just hoped that, at least, Jared would admit his mistake. That was the only thing to do at this point if they hoped to move forward. Jared felt as though he'd been slapped in the face. His stomach sank down to the floor. He did not expect his brother and Georgina to catch him out with Olivia, and the last person he thought he would have to explain himself to was his grandfather. He told himself to stop panicking. He couldn't figure out a response if he was just panicking. There had to be a way out. And suddenly he thought of it. Jared almost smiled, giving himself away. His stomach felt like it returned to its normal position. He made a decision and composed his expression. Jared looked straight at his grandfather. "Grandpa, I don't know what you're talking about." Georgina smiled deviously. "Oh no, you can't just deny your way out of this. I saw it with my own eyes. It definitely happened." Jared turned to Georgina. "You saw me on a date with Olivia with your own eyes. Where was this?" Georgina crossed his arms. "It was at a bar in the city. I saw Olivia enter the private room you were in with my own eyeballs." Jared narrowed his eyes. "And then?" Georgina snorted. "And then the door closed. Ding dong. Do you not remember what you did? Do you want me to spell all this out? I would think you wouldn't want me to have to recount it bit by bit for everybody. Aren't you embarrassed hearing it out loud?" Jared frowned. "You saw Olivia Johnson in the same room as me. Does that mean what you said it means? If it was some sort of inappropriate affair, why would we be meeting in a bar? Wouldn't it make more sense that you would catch us at a hotel?" Jake began to grow angry, irritated at the confusing turn the conversation had taken. "Jared Nevin, I didn't expect you to try to get out of this by talking about such dirty things in front of our grandfather in his study." Jared did not flinch at his brother's rising temper. "I'm talking about the facts of what happened. Also, are you sure it was only Olivia and me in that room?" "Huh?" Georgina's mouth fell open in confusion. Jared put his hands in his pockets. "It was true that I was hosting Olivia Johnson in a private room in a bar, but it was not just her, but her friend Morgana as well." He turned to Georgina. "If you did in fact see Olivia in my room, then you also should have seen Morgana who was with her." Georgina felt caught, which she did not expect to happen in that conversation. She forgot in her excitement to see him with Olivia that she did indeed see Morgana as well, that weird loser. She just saw a glance of the two of them when the door opened and shut. The person beside Olivia, It did make sense that it would be Morgana, but she wasn't sure if she was imagining the memory now that Jared put it in her mind. She felt flustered. Jake scoffed. "What is it? Are you not talking because you don't want to admit it?" "Well, what does it matter if I saw her?" Georgina raised her hand defensively, getting heated. "So what if Morgana was there? Why were you alone with her and Olivia? You can't just bring up that her friend was there and think that the rest of it doesn't matter." Jake nodded. "Yeah, maybe her friend was just a cover for you two to date because she needs an alibi to tell her fiancé." Jake made sure to put air quotes around the word fiancé. He knew that on the Upper East Side, many relationships were arranged simply because they made for good business deals. He had never thought of it before, but it made sense to him that Olivia Johnson and Chris Jones were the product of exactly such an arrangement. Jared shrugged, looking speechless. "So no matter what, you guys are certain that Olivia Johnson and I are dating, right? It seems like there's nothing I can say to dissuade you from this picture you're painting." Georgina was not happy. "What do you mean that we're painting a picture? Are you saying we're framing you? We're just saying what happened." Jake did not want to back down. "Olivia's best friends with Morgana. You probably just invited her to try to date her because you want her friends to like you too. You didn't disprove anything. I'm so disappointed in you, Jared." Jared sneered. "When have you ever been not disappointed in me? It's my freedom to meet with whoever I wish. I have my reasons." Georgina was at a loss. She felt like they had caught Jared with the smoking gun, and he was still acting like they were the ones who did something wrong. "What are the reasons, then?" she protested. "Tell us. If you don't, how do we know that they're not just total bull?" Grandpa Jacob rubbed his forehead. "Language, Georgina." "But it's true." She spoke in a tiny voice, scared of her grandfather. Jared shook his head. "Grandpa, I only want to talk to you about this. I don't think they need to know." Jake and Georgina's eyes widened so big they looked like they were going to pop out of their heads. Jake's standing in their family was about to evaporate, and he was still making plays on them. Georgina was supremely offended. "What is it that you have to say behind our backs, Jared? Are you trying to trick Grandpa?" Jake knew he had to prevent Jared from talking to their grandfather alone. "She's right. If you have nothing shameful to say, why can't you say it now? You just want more time to make something up." Jake became increasingly angry, thinking about how Jared had always done things with their grandfather behind his back. He had tricked their foolish old grandfather into trusting him before. So if they were left alone in this moment, then he might very well be able to do it again. Grandpa Jacob waved his hand at Jake and Georgina. "Both of you, get out." Jake and Georgina's faces fell. "Grandpa!" They both cried in unison. They couldn't believe what they were hearing, completely flabbergasted, wondering how dumb their grandfather must be to allow such a thing. Grandpa Nevin slammed the table. "Get out!" Jake and Georgina were frightened into silence. They turned to leave the study, each of them shooting a glare in Jared's direction on their way out. Closing the door behind them, only Jared and his grandfather were left in the eerily silent room. Grandpa Jacob coughed lightly, the deep rattle in his lungs betraying how sick he was at that moment. "Jared, say your piece. I am eager to hear what you have to say for yourself." Jared sighed, his face softening. "Grandpa, there are 2 reasons why I met with Olivia Johnson today. One is because of the roses, and the other is because of you." "The roses and me?" Grandpa Jack was surprised to hear both of these. He coughed twice, then continued. "What does this have to do with the roses?" "When the Rose Company debuted, you agreed that it would be a good idea to work with them only if Mark DeLillo did not have any suspicious business practices. In fact, you said that if Mr. DeLillo was not an upstanding businessman, but rather someone who plays dirty, then I might as well work with Olivia Johnson. Do you remember?" Jared paused for a moment as that sank in. His grandfather nodded, realizing that Jared was right. Jared continued. "It is apparent to me now that Mark DeLillo does play dirty." Jacob's eyes widened, on edge to hear more. Jacob Nevin looked at his youngest grandson in shock. What? Mark DeLillo is using shady business practices? He couldn't believe what Jared had just told him. Are you serious? Are you sure? Jared did not want to embarrass his grandfather, but knew that he needed to share this information to get himself out of hot water. No one would joke about this, he affirmed. It's no secret that Mark has this reputation in New York for the way he acts. It's public knowledge that he was arrested during the Handler family gala for harassing that woman under his own employment. He was only released that night because he paid his way out. That whole arrest reflects the way he is behind closed doors, too. Jacob's face darkened. He had heard about Mark's arrest, but assumed it was a temporary lapse in judgment. Many men were tempted to abuse their power once they had it. He hoped that Mark had straightened himself out once he felt the sting of those consequences. But it seemed like he was wrong. Jared cleared his throat. In my opinion, Mark doesn't even seem to want to compete with the park company. It seems like instead he ran away after a single shot was fired back from them. As far as I know, Mark has already started buying land in large quantities in Brooklyn. It looks like he's turning to land speculation and real estate development to make some money. Jacob's heart skipped a beat. Brooklyn? He immediately understood what was going on. The Rose Company was testing the business circle in New York City and preparing for the future. He would probably also make a huge amount of money. A cash grab that huge made him nervous that his partner would instead be a powerful new rival. Jared nodded. Yes, Brooklyn. The plans he has will probably be built up in 2 or 3 years. The Rose Company can currently stand to wait 2 or 3 years before turning a profit. Grandpa Nevin paused. Then what is he? Jared hesitated. Grandpa, I have a very premature guess. Go ahead, Jacob replied eagerly. Jared spoke carefully. I heard that Mark DeLillo's capital is all funded by some mysterious person. Do you think perhaps that this is a money laundering activity for somebody who has a lot of cash, but got it in a dirty way? Jacob Nevin's eyes lit up. He immediately understood. Yes, Jared, it is very likely that this venture involves money laundering. If the Rose Company participates in that, it is likely that if they got caught, their whole company will go down. Jared looked nervously at his grandfather. This is just my own guess, Grandpa. But with how huge that risk is, I think the Rose Company and Mark DeLillo are not suitable business partners. It would even create blowback on us or our business in the future. Jacob nodded. This is wise to think about. Jared felt more optimistic by the second. He was so relieved that his grandfather's anger had been turned back into something positive. That's why I asked to meet with Olivia today, Jared explained. I'm actually also testing her attitude toward the Nevin family. If there really is some huge issue coming up, we still need to learn to be flexible. Grandpa Nevin still held a grudge against Olivia, namely because she was Andrew Park's granddaughter, and he had a hand in ruining the Park family years before. Now he lived in fear that Andrew Park would come back to seek his revenge. Jacob Nevin cleared his throat. How was her attitude today? He asked carefully. Jared nodded. She seemed very sincere and excited to connect. Even though I did not spell out all of my suspicions clearly, I just said that I hoped we could work together more in the future. I do think Olivia is good in a business situation. She seems trustworthy and intelligent. She makes people invest in her. I know she's still young, but so am I. I really don't think she's the kind of person who would get into something risky and underhanded. Grandpa Nevin sighed. Jared noticed that he seemed to be recalling the past and getting lost in that memory. It sounds like Olivia is very similar to her grandfather on the Park side, he remarked cryptically. Jared thought that this was the time for him to make his move. Grandpa, I think for the future of the Nevin family, we might really have to consider rearranging our partnerships. We still have time. Grandpa Jacob was slightly stunned. He looked away and hesitated. He thought to himself privately that his grandson was right. It was not too late to ally with Olivia. But if Andrew Park came back to fight, would they be able to survive that? Jared knew his grandfather was unsure. There is one more thing. I did say that the other reason I wanted to meet with her was for you, Grandpa. Grandpa picked up the teacup of medicinal tea beside him and took a sip, feeling cool relief radiating in his throat. "Explain," he commanded. "What do you mean?" Jared took a deep breath, nervous. Olivia's best friend is named Morgana, and she was there today as well. Her brother is said to be an amazing doctor. Olivia thinks highly of him too. I want him to take a look at you. Jacob's hands holding his teacup stiffened. He looked at Jared, a touch of relief in his eyes. He put his teacup aside. "You are so thoughtful, my grandson." "Of course, once I heard about him, I had to do it," Jared replied truthfully. "Morgana asked me to see if you're interested when you have the time. Her brother can come and take a look at you." To Jared's surprise, Grandpa Jacob shook his head. "No need for that. I have a destiny, Jared. I think it's up to the heavens when I'm taken. I do not need anything new or experimental to try to prolong the inevitable." Jared frowned. His heart broke to hear his grandfather say that. "But your cough," he protested helplessly. "It is fine, don't worry about that." Jacob waved a hand. "The tea you found for me is quite good. It's made me much more comfortable." He turned to his desk, uncomfortable with the vulnerable moment. "If that is all, you can go." Jared nodded and turned to leave when he thought of something. He turned back to his grandfather. "Grandpa, it does matter what decision you make. This matter has to be resolved slowly and carefully. We don't want to leave any traces of what we're doing." "Why do you say that?" Jacob's brow furrowed. Jared wrung his hands. "If you insist on continuing our partnership with the Rose Company, you have to be careful that their illegal activities won't implicate the Nevins as well. But if you ultimately want to choose the Park Company, you can't rush it." After a pause, he added, "Jake supports Mark DeLillo so much. There must be a reason. If Mark DeLillo has some information on Jake or on the Nevin family, it wouldn't be good to cause a big conflict with him." Grandpa Jacob nodded. "I understand. You have a keen eye for strategy, Jared," he said. Jared's heart soared. His grandfather cleared his throat. "That is all. Please ask Jake and Georgina to come in." "Yes," Jared answered him with a nod. He left the study, went downstairs, and saw Jake whispering something to Georgina in the living room. The two of them sat next to each other on the couch, practically cuddling. And Jared thought reflexively to himself that it didn't look like a scene that was taking place between cousins. He felt disgusted and wondered what other trouble his older brother was getting into. Jake noticed Jared appear in the doorway. He leaned away from Georgina and looked at Jared expectantly. Jared kept his expression neutral. "Grandpa said he wants you to come to the study to talk to him." Georgina narrowed her eyes, giving him a malicious look. "Jared, don't think we don't know what you're planning. I hate to even look at you now. Jake told me everything." Jared was not bothered. "You can think whatever you want." Georgina snorted. "You just stare at things in this house that don't belong to you all day. I hope you enjoy it." She glared at Jared and went upstairs. Jake seemed satisfied with Georgina's comment. He smiled deviously, then put his hands in his pockets and glared at Jared as he left the living room on the way to see his grandfather. He stopped and looked back at Jared. "No matter what dirty tricks you have up your sleeve, you can only dream of getting to inherit the role of running this family. It's not going to be your life." Jared held his brother's gaze. "Ditto," he replied. The two of them faced off, staring bitterly at the other brother. Jake turned around and walked toward the study. He would never let his brother know, but he felt nervous. He silently wondered what it even mattered if his brother had made some smart comments to Grandpa Jacob. Jake had the truth on his side, and nobody could argue with the truth. Jake strode back into his grandfather's study. feeling sure that he would finally be vindicated. But as soon as he saw the look on Jacob Nevin's face, his confidence began to wither. Jake saw as his grandfather opened his mouth to say something, but Jake was so distracted by the obvious turn in his grandfather's mood, he didn't hear what he said. "Speak! Can't you answer a single question?" Grandpa Jacob barked, snapping Jake back to attention. Jake looked to Georgina, but it seemed she was even more terrified of the situation than he was. Jacob coughed, then drank another mouthful of tea as he looked at his grandchildren, disappointed. Georgina, frightened, tried to reply. "Grandfather, I think these questions have nothing to do with what Jared did today." Grandpa Nevin rapped on his desk with a knuckle. "But it has something to do with what you did." Jacob was so angry that he did not notice the details when Jake and Georgina had initially come to him about Jared. But then he had thought about it and found out there were multiple inconsistencies with the story they told him. Jake felt anger rising inside him, indignant that his plan had been foiled. "Grandpa, did Jared tell you a bunch of lies? Don't be fooled by him." Grandpa Nevin shook his head. "This has nothing to do with Jared. I am the one asking you, and you have yet to respond. Answer me, and quickly." Georgina and Jake both looked pale, scared out of their minds. They both stammered and could not begin a coherent sentence. Jacob felt disgusted at his descendants. "What? Don't you remember the questions? I just answered them." He shook his head. "I will repeat the first question for you. Why did Georgina choose not to greet Jared after she saw him, and instead come back to tell Jake? And the second question, after Jake knew about this matter, why did he not speak with Jared to try to confirm? What were you looking for from all of this? And the third question..." "That's enough!" Jake shouted, no longer able to suppress his anger. Jacob's eyes widened, unable to believe that his grandson had just yelled at him in this way. But Jake was not done. "You want to side with Jared, don't you, Grandpa?" Jake was so mad that his old, muddle-headed grandfather was being so foolish and so easily taken in. It was such an obvious case of Jared being underhanded and wrong. But he thought that it was just like Jared to worm his way out of trouble and get their grandfather to question Jake and Georgina's motives instead. He thought that his grandfather should have been grilling Jared instead. He and Georgina weren't the ones who made mistakes and betrayed the family. Why should they be the ones who were interrogated like prisoners? Jacob felt the familiar heavy sadness that came with feeling disappointed in his grandson and heir yet again. It was childish and short-sighted of Jake to fly into a rage because he was humiliated. He felt even worse that when he had thought that Jared had betrayed the entire Nevin family. Jake was the oldest son in the Nevin family. He had been raised from birth to succeed Jacob. But Jacob felt that he had put too much energy into Jake after all that time. He had truly nurtured Jake as his successor. But something went wrong. He was left with an immature, impulsive monster. He had no idea why his eldest grandson became that way, and did not know what mistakes he must have made. He thought that he could tolerate Jake's lack of intelligence. He could accept that Jake's strength did not lie in business. He could even ignore Jake's arrogance and pettiness. But all of it together all this time, and then turning against his brother, it was too much. Grandpa Nevin felt a little dizzy. "If you're not going to answer my questions, you can leave." He waved a hand helplessly, trying to shoo them out. "Go!" "Huh." Jake snorted and left the study, slamming the door behind him. "Jake!" Georgina cried, watching him go. She looked at her grandfather and said half-heartedly, Then, Grandpa, I'm leaving too." She walked out of the study like her feet were on burning coals and carefully closed the door behind her. Jake rushed to Jared's bedroom and threw the door open to find Jared at his desk. "Jared Nevin, you stupid bastard!" Jake lunged for Jared, throwing a punch at his face. Jared was too shocked to dodge or block it. Jake socked him right in the eye, and Jared fell to the floor. Jake yanked Jared up by his collar with one hand and threw a punch at the side of his face. Jared was hit twice in a row and immediately came back to his senses. He used one hand to cover Jake's fist as he was about to swing again. Jared used his other hand to punch Jake in the jaw. The two brothers twisted together and fell to the ground. "Hey, stop that! Stop fighting!" Georgina hurried in, followed by a group of the Nevin staff who had heard a commotion from the hall. Georgina tried to figure out how to get in between the two brothers to stop them from fighting without getting hurt herself. But the two of them kept swinging at one another, fiercely entangled. Downstairs, the Nevins' family butler hurried to the study, approaching Jacob. "Sir, it's bad. Young Master Jake and young Master Jared are fighting." "What?" Grandpa Nevin shouted, worried, suddenly feeling a buzzing sound in his head. Jacob got up and hurried to the door of Jared's room, where he saw that the two of them were carrying on their raging fight. Grandpa Jacob shouted, "Both of you stop right now!" When the two young men saw Grandpa Nevin, they each stopped, frozen in place. At that moment, both of them had murderous intent in their eyes and bruises on their faces. Jake's first punch had given Jared a black eye, which looked worse than any of the other scrapes and bruises either brother had received. Jake felt dumbfounded once he realized their grandfather had arrived. "Grandpa, it's not what it looks like." Grandpa Jacob tried to speak, feeling dizzier by the second. Ew! Ew! His eyes rolled back in his head as he fainted before he could say another word. Jared immediately broke out into a cold sweat, turning to the butler. "Hurry up and call an ambulance quick!" He then kneeled over his grandfather, trying to get him to respond. "Grandpa! Grandpa! Quick!" Jake roared at the butler, who complied. His mind went blank. What was wrong with his grandfather? Jake did not know that his grandfather had terminal cancer. As far as he knew, Jacob's health had always been good. He had a slight cough, of course, but this was normal for someone of his age. Jake had no idea why he would have suddenly fainted. Georgina tried to come to her senses, overwhelmed by the sight of her grandfather collapsed on the floor. "Grandpa? Grandpa! Quick!" Jake roared. His mind was blank. He had no idea what was wrong with his grandfather. Georgina held one hand to her throat and the other hugged around her torso. She relied on Grandpa Nevin for a lot of monetary support. She didn't know what she would do if this was the end of their grandfather. She wondered if the Nevin family would still back her financially. The Nevin's grandchildren took Grandpa Nevin to the hospital. Once they were there, the doctor began to ask questions about Jacob's current health details, and Jared answered smoothly, giving all the information he had about Jacob's illnesses. Jake was completely flabbergasted but did not interject. Georgina had contacted her mother Jessica on the ride to the hospital, and she had rushed right over. "How is Dad?" Jessica Nevin asked when she finally reached them. "He's already in the ICU," Jared replied. "Auntie, don't worry, he'll be okay." Jessica frowned at Jared's black eye. "What happened to your face?" She spun to Jake, seeing that he had some smaller bruises as well. "And you?" Jared and Jake tried to move to cover their injuries, but it was too late. She had seen. Jessica sighed heavily. She immediately understood. It must have been the two brothers fighting at home that must have made Grandpa Jacob angry enough to faint and wind up in the hospital. "You are no longer children," she angrily scolded them. "Do you not know how to behave?" "Mom, it's not Jake's fault," Georgina interrupted. "It's Jared's fault." Jared did not argue and just apologized. "Auntie Jessica, I'm so sorry." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to tell me that. You should go tell your grandfather." Jake glared at Jared, ruminating on how the whole situation was all Jared's fault. He wondered if Jared had anything better to do than cause trouble. A doctor wearing a mask emerged through the hallway and approached them. "Hello, which one of you is Jacob Nevin's immediate contact?" "I am," they all said in unison. Jessica glanced at the two brothers and stepped forward in front of them toward the door. "You can talk to me, I'm his daughter." The doctor nodded gratefully. "Okay, I am sorry to inform you that Jacob's condition is not looking very good. It seems the cancer cells have spread. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. What did you say? What cancer cells? The doctor looked back and forth between Jake, Jessica, and Georgina's shocked expressions at the news that Jacob Nevin had cancer. You didn't know he had cancer? The doctor understood and nodded. Do you know what stage the cancer is now? Jared asked directly. As the only one who already knew about their grandfather's diagnosis, he went straight to asking practical questions. What are the chances that we can control the spread with treatment? The other Nevin family member stared at Jared, dumbfounded at his ability to stay cool and collected after such devastating news about Jacob Nevin. Jared knew at that moment that he would have to be the one to communicate with the doctor and complete the paperwork for his grandfather. He felt so tired that he leaned against the wall. He did not have the strength to continue standing on his own, and the bruises on his face caused wave after pounding wave of pain that was increasingly difficult for him to ignore. Jake was overcome with his own paralyzing rush of anxiety. But rather than rise to the occasion, he was completely helpless. He felt the panic rise in his throat as he stared down the reality of needing to make decisions for the family in his grandfather's absence, and he could not do it. Jessica's face had turned grave, and she remained silent, but the complicated thoughts in her heart were evident in her eyes. Georgina looked from Jake's terrified face to Jared's serious but calm one. She quickly concluded that Jared must be excellent at sucking up in order to have been told about their grandfather's cancer. Why else would he know about it and not Jake? The distrust and resentment in her heart towards Jared ticked upward significantly. Georgina could see the writing on the wall. If the Nevin family fortune fell into Jared's hands in the future, it would be very bad news for her. Your grandfather's condition has stabilized for now, the doctor explained. He will be transferred to a hospital room and you can be with him there. He should regain consciousness very soon. You don't have to worry too much, he added reassuringly. Thank you, doctor. We appreciate everything you have done. Jessica nodded, still visibly shaken. Of course. The doctor smiled warmly before he turned around and left. Jared let out a long, relieved breath. His heart had been racing for the entire interaction with the doctor, but he could feel it finally started to slow down. Why are you both just standing there? Jessica frowned at Jake and Jared as several nurses began to move their grandfather out of the emergency room. Go help! Jake and Jared heard Jessica scolding and quickly jumped to assist the nurses with their grandfather. After some difficulty, they successfully moved Grandpa Jacob from the ER up to a VIP hospital room on the top floor. Once he was settled inside, Jared, Jessica, Jake, and Georgina lingered outside of the room. Jared, why don't you go and get us all something to eat? Jessica suggested impatiently. Oh, okay, Jared agreed without a fuss. He understood that they were all having a difficult time wrestling with Grandpa Jacob's cancer diagnosis, since it was their first time hearing of it. Jared knew they deserved some extra space for their emotions, so he helpfully hurried out to look for food. As soon as Jared left, Jessica looked coldly at Jake. You didn't even know that your grandfather was unwell? You're so busy being completely wrapped up in yourself? My expectations are already low, and still you managed to be a disappointment, she said in an icy voice. Auntie. Jake looked at Jessica helplessly and did not know what to say back. He was offended that his aunt had nothing good to say about him and was completely dumbfounded that she would say it so bluntly to his face. He could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to him so harshly, much less someone in his own family. At the same time, Jake could not help feeling a bit guilty deep down. He knew that technically he was responsible for his grandfather's health scare that day, on top of his diagnosis of incurable cancer. The more Jake thought about what the doctor had revealed about Grandpa Nevin's poor health, the guiltier he felt. You really didn't know anything about your grandfather's illness? Jessica asked Jake incredulously. I've noticed that he coughs kind of a lot. Jake stammered and looked at the floor in shame. And how did Jared know about it? Jessica frowned. How would I know? Jake shrugged indignantly. The mention of Jared's name made Jake feel even worse. There was nothing Jake hated more than being shown up by his younger brother. The way it works in the Nevin family is simple. The eldest son of the Nevin family inherits the position of patriarch, Jessica said as she glared at Jake. But you must understand by now that times have changed. Whether this traditional succession rule gets upheld depends entirely on your grandfather's opinion. If you want to hold on to your place in the front of the line, you better start acting like it. Jake had known all along that what Jessica described was a possibility. If it wasn't, he never would have felt so threatened by Jared throughout their lives. Mom, this whole thing can't entirely be blamed on Jake, Georgina interrupted. You don't know the whole story. Jared, he's a surprisingly good actor and doesn't tell the truth. That part is the only fact we can rely on. He knows how to manipulate situations. Earlier when Grandpa Nevin scolded the two of us... Hold on. You're saying that you were also involved in what happened today? Jessica asked, her eyelid beginning to twitch out of anger. Georgina stammered. As she faced her mother's furious glare, she decided to shut her mouth instead. All of you have really disappointed me. It's an understatement. Jessica sighed and brought her hand to her throbbing temple, at a loss for what else to say. Auntie, you must be so tired. Why don't you go back and rest? Jake said weakly. Go back? Jessica snorted. Your grandfather hasn't even woken up yet. I'm not going anywhere. The doctor said that Grandpa will wake up from the anesthesia soon, Georgina said. She caught on to Jake's efforts to defuse the situation. Why don't we go back together, Mom? Secretly, Georgina also had a reality show that she wanted to catch that night, and there was still time if they left now. Shut up, Jessica snapped at Georgina. She had never been more disappointed in her daughter for being so stupid. Jessica could barely recognize her own short-sighted child in that moment and did not know if this was really who she had raised. Georgina could not understand why her mother seemed to have such a terrible temper that day. Grandpa Nevin's circumstances and the news about his already failing health could reasonably cause Jessica to be worried. But Georgina felt strongly that she did not deserve for her mother to take all of her emotions out on her. She did not give Grandpa Nevin cancer, after all. No one wanted that to happen. Besides, Georgina felt Jared was the one who had caused the entire chain of events by conspicuously being out with Olivia. She felt it was unfair of her mother to shout at her. Georgina fumed silently. Jake glanced at Jessica and Georgina and turned to look up at Grandpa Nevin. He had no idea when he might wake up. This was all so sudden, and Jake started to feel the panic rise in his throat again. Jared will be back in a bit. Do not let him see your grandfather, Jessica urged suddenly in a low voice. What? Jake asked Jessica in surprise. He had no idea how to react. If you still want to inherit the patriarchal rule in this family, you need to do as I say. It's about time an adult gave you some tough love, Jessica said sharply. She felt in her heart that the family was about to be in shambles if she did not intervene immediately. As a woman, Jessica did not have much control in the family, but she could not stand by and abandon it. Not on her watch. Jake gulped and nodded obediently. You don't have to go back to school or the company for the next few days. Just stay by your grandfather's bedside, and whatever you do, don't let Jared in. When your grandfather wakes up, it will be you at his side with Jared nowhere in sight, Jessica instructed. Okay. Jake finally understood why Jessica did not want him to let Jared get near their grandfather. This was an opportunity to earn some points with Grandpa Nevin and secure his place as the Nevin heir. He knew it didn't matter if Jared's sucking up was genuine or calculated. It was clearly enough to win over the old man. Jake had always hated Jared's little tricks, but clearly time was of the essence, and he was going to have to fight fire with fire. The undeniable truth was that Grandpa Nevin favored Jared, and Jake had to do something about it. Quick. Just then, Grandpa Nevin's eyelids fluttered. Jared had a feeling his Aunt Jessica was trying to get rid of him when she sent him for food, but he was so flustered by the day's events he chose not to argue. As Jared returned to Grandpa Nevin's VIP hospital room with bags of takeout, he began to feel his heart race at the thought that this could be the end for his grandfather. Jared entered the room, setting the bags on a table and turning to his aunt. "This has been a difficult day for everyone, so I made sure to get extra food." "Indeed," Jessica said as she glanced at the time. She anxiously eyed Grandpa Jacob Nevin, who remained unconscious in his bed. He had almost woken up just a few minutes ago, but had fallen back into a deep sleep right before any of them had the chance to get a word in. Jessica was grateful that her father hadn't woken while Jared was in the room, but she had to find a way to get rid of him once and for all. Jared, I will have to trouble you with another task," Jessica mentioned casually. "Oh?" Jared asked as he finished setting out a stack of napkins and plastic forks. "We need you to find an advanced care nurse for your grandfather. We need the very best to coordinate his care plan going forward," Jessica said. "I think we both know you are more reliable than the others. If you handle this, I will not worry," she said in a low voice. "Of course," Jared nodded. He knew that between all of them, he was the most up to speed on Grandpa Nevin's condition, and it made sense for him to be the one to speak to a nurse. There was really no other option. Jared looked at Grandpa Nevin and his eyes remained closed. Just then, Jake stepped forward to block Jared's view of their grandfather and impatiently folded his arms across his chest. "Well, why are you still standing there? What are you waiting for? You heard Aunt Jessica." Jared clenched his jaw. He was not in a mood to argue with Jake anymore, especially in their grandfather's hospital room. He turned back to Jessica. "I also brought some oatmeal and soup from downstairs for Grandpa. I can give it to him when he wakes up." "Good thinking," Jessica nodded. Jared ignored Jake and walked out of the hospital room. Jessica raised her eyebrows pointedly at Jake since she had successfully driven Jared away. "That's enough sucking up." Georgina snorted coldly and scowled as soon as Jared left. "Georgina, hush!" Jessica urged and made a zipping motion at her lips to signal silence. Georgina pouted her lips and turned in a huff to pick through the food Jared had brought. Just then, Grandpa Jacob Nevin's eyelids fluttered, and he slowly opened his eyes as he coughed slightly. Jacob looked around the room, disoriented from the anesthesia. "Grandpa!" Jake exclaimed as soon as he heard Jacob stir. "How are you feeling?" The concern in his voice sounded unnatural, and Jake knew he would need to work on it. "Dad?" Jessica said as she quickly moved to Jacob's bedside. "How do you feel? Do you want us to call the doctor?" "Grandpa!" Georgina chimed in and hurried to join the others around Jacob's bed. Jacob coughed again and shook his head no as he looked at Jessica, Jake, and Georgina standing around him. "Grandpa, do you want some water?" Jake asked. "Here, Jake brought you soup. Have a sip. It will soothe your throat." Jessica piped up. "Huh?" Jake asked, confused for a moment. It had been Jared who had brought the soup. They all knew that. Jake saw Jessica raise her eyebrows at him and he suddenly caught on. "Yes, I did get you soup." He nodded obediently. "Right, Georgina, get the soup out of the bag for your cousin Jake." Jessica nudged. Georgina jumped up and grabbed the soup and one of the plastic spoons Jared had laid out on the table. She handed them both to Jake. Jake took the soup and turned to Grandpa Jacob. He carefully fed him a spoonful of the warm broth. After Grandpa Jacob swallowed the mouthful, he breathed a deep, satisfied sigh. The soup did soothe his throat considerably, and he felt much more comfortable. "Is that better, Grandpa?" Jake asked. "Much better." Jacob sighed softly. His voice was thin and weak. He looked from Jake to Jessica, and his brow furrowed slightly. "Where is Jared?" When he heard Grandpa Jacob's question, Jake's pleasant expression quickly soured. He wanted to remind his grandfather that they were the ones there waiting on him. Not precious Jared. Jake could barely contain his anger. "Jared?" Jessica said, and her expression froze for a moment as she thought of how to explain his absence. He was very tired after all of the excitement today. He's probably already back home sleeping. Jessica explained and made a show of rolling her eyes with disapproval. Grandpa Jacob heard Jessica's answer about Jared and slightly lowered his head. No one could see his face and guess what he might be thinking. Jared has really been something else today, Georgina chimed in. She seized the opportunity to throw dirt on Jared as well. I mean, here you are, Grandpa, feeling so unwell, and he still has the gall to go home and sleep at a time like this? Honestly, the nerve. He usually at least pretends to be loyal, but I guess when you weren't awake, he didn't feel like bothering. Georgina shrugged. Georgina, Jessica exclaimed. She purposely waited for Georgina to finish her whole disparaging statement about Jared before she pretended to disapprove and cut her off. Don't say such nonsense. Georgina pouted unhappily. She thought they were supposed to be making Jared look bad, but she felt like she just could not win no matter what she did. Georgina, you have school in the morning, you should head home, Jessica said bluntly with a pointed look. Me? Why do I have to go? Georgina did not understand for a moment. Her mother had refused to let her leave before Grandpa Jacob had woken up, but now all of a sudden she was being chased out? Jessica saw that Georgina did not understand her true intentions, so she quickly tried another way. Jake, keep an eye on your grandfather and take good care of him. I will walk your cousin to the car. Don't worry, I will. Jake nodded solemnly. Dad, I will be right back, Jessica reassured Grandpa Jacob. All right, Grandpa Jacob replied weakly. His voice was hoarse and exhausted. He continued to hang his head slightly and did not look up. Jessica dragged the puzzled Georgina outside of the hospital room and hissed in her ear. You stand here and just wait. Huh? Georgina asked, completely confused. She really had no idea what her mother wanted from her. Jessica sighed impatiently. When Jared comes back later, you're going to be here to stop him from getting back in. You have to convince him to take you home and then send a message to Jake when you've succeeded. Oh, Georgina nodded once she finally understood Jessica's plan. After a pause, she had another thought. But Mom, it's late at night, and I'll be all alone with him. He hates me. What if he tries to hurt me or do something inappropriate? Georgina thought about how much she hated Jared. That won't happen, Jessica said dismissively. She was certain of it, and the irony of Georgina worrying about Jared rather than Jake, who Jessica had no doubt would take advantage of a situation like this, almost made Jessica laugh. Jared was not at all the type to do anything bad. In fact, this was the primary reason Jessica strongly supported Jake as the heir to the Nevin family instead of Jared. Jared was a very upstanding young man. Jessica believed that the more upstanding a person was, the more difficult they were to control. Georgina pursed her lips. But I don't want to go home with Cousin Jared. I hate him, and I'm sure he hates me too. Is this some kind of sick joke? Just you wait, Jessica said calmly. She patted Georgina's shoulder and walked back into Grandpa Jacob's hospital room without another word. Georgina waited in the hallway and pouted. She blamed Jared entirely for putting her in this position. She had no idea when he would return, and she was going to be even more furious if he delayed her making it back in time to watch her reality show. Georgina grumbled to herself and folded her arms. When Jessica returned to the hospital room, she saw Jake feed Grandpa Jacob another spoonful of soup, just as he had instructed. The scene made a smile appear on her lips. Dad, I'm back. Yes, you did come back quickly, Grandpa Jacob said. Did you see Georgina to the car? Yes, Jessica lied. I had one of the drivers waiting downstairs. Grandpa Jacob shrugged and said nothing more about Georgina. Grandpa, do you want us to call the doctor over to check on you? Jake asked. There is no need. Grandpa Jacob waved his hand and leaned back on his pillow. I'm fine. Grandpa, when did you become so ill? Why didn't you tell us anything? Jake asked, betraying a bit too much complaining in his tone. Why would I need to tell you? You are not my doctors," Grandpa Jacob answered gruffly. Jake thought angrily that Jared was not a doctor either, and yet their grandfather had chosen to tell him. But Jake quickly swallowed his retort. He knew it was not the time to anger his grandfather. He was supposed to be winning him over. Jake reminded himself that if his brother Jared could win their grandfather's favor, so could he. He was the eldest grandson of the Nevin family after all. He was definitely not weaker than Jared. "Dad, you can't really blame Jake for asking, can you?" Jessica smiled soothingly. "You fainted very suddenly and scared us all. When I got to the hospital, Jake was so worried about you. He was so good he spoke with the doctor. He helped move you to your room. He brought up food for you. He got back just in time for you to wake up. He's just very worried about you." Grandpa Jacob looked up at Jake and stared at him for some time before he finally said, "Thank you." "It was no trouble at all. It's my duty as your grandson." Jake nodded. "No matter what, I will do whatever I can for you." "I know," Grandpa Jacob responded. His face did not change, but his hand suddenly clenched into a fist. He knew in his heart that he could not trust this grandson of his. Jared had been feeling disoriented ever since watching his grandfather faint in front of him. He knew there was nothing he could really do to help his grandfather, but he was willing to try. After finding a suitable specialized nurse for Grandpa Jacob, Jared quickly made his way back to his grandfather's VIP hospital room. Jared had no idea about his grandfather's status, or how he was doing since he had been sent away on so many errands. He worried that Grandpa Jacob might not even wake up, but he hoped that he would feel better once he could finally see him with his own eyes. "Jared!" Georgina called out as soon as she saw him coming down the hall. She had been wandering the corridor awaiting his return, just as her mother told her. She hurried over to greet Jared. "Why are you in such a hurry?" Jared asked wearily when he saw Georgina rush to him. He had been away for quite a while and he feared the worst. "Did something happen to Grandpa?" No, he's fine," Georgina assured him. She took Jared's hand and squeezed it in a way that she hoped was comforting. "Nothing happened. He actually woke up." "Oh," Jared sighed with relief. "Then I'll go see him now." Wait a minute," Georgina quickly said as she held onto Jared's hand to keep him there. "Grandpa is awake. He's totally fine. He wanted you to take me home." "Huh?" Jared frowned in surprise. "Grandpa said he wants me to take you home." "Yes." Georgina rolled her eyes annoyed. "That's why I was out here in the first place. I've just been waiting for you." "Okay, I can take you home, but first I'll go see him," Jared said. He thought it was strange that his grandfather would suggest that he leave with Georgina when he had not had a chance to see him. "Hey, where are you going? Didn't you hear what I said?" Georgina asked anxiously. She could not let him go into that hospital room. "You've already caused enough trouble for tonight. Your fight with Jake made Grandfather so angry that it put him in the hospital to begin with. Do you want to upset him again and risk killing him this time? Just do what he asked and don't question it. That would be the most helpful thing for him right now." Jared stopped in his tracks on his way to the hospital room. He looked very conflicted. Georgina quietly sighed in relief when she saw Jared stop before he entered the hospital room. "Well, what are we waiting for? Are you going to take me home like Grandpa asked?" "Are you sure Grandpa is awake?" Jared asked. He looked skeptically at Georgina. "Of course I'm sure." Georgina nodded impatiently. "I wouldn't be going home right now if he wasn't awake. He's worried about me going home in a taxi with a strange driver at this time of night, so he asked me to wait for you to come back so that you could take me home. How many times do I have to explain it?" "But couldn't you just call one of the family's drivers?" Jared wrinkled his brow, starting to suspect that something was going on. "No, Grandpa said not to bother them." Georgina stomped her foot like a petulant child. "Now let's go already." "All right, okay, we'll go." Jared relented. He felt that something was a bit off, but since the order to take Georgina home had apparently come from his grandfather, he didn't want to risk upsetting him again by disobeying. "Let's go," Georgina watched Jared turn away from the hospital room and walk towards the elevator. It brought a proud smile to her face. To Georgina, manipulating Jared was just further proof that all men in the world were fools. On the way out of the hospital, Georgina turned to Jared and asked, "Did you manage to find a decent nurse?" "Yes, she will be here tomorrow morning. Until then, Auntie and Jake will have to take good care of Grandpa on their own. But they'll survive one night," Jared replied. "Oh," Georgina said quickly, remembering something she was supposed to do. She immediately texted Jake. Jake's phone chimed with an incoming message as he fished it out of his pocket. When he saw the message from Georgina, he rolled his eyes. "Auntie, why don't you have some food first? I'll stay with Grandpa until the full-time nurse gets here tomorrow morning." "I suppose I can eat something," Jessica replied. She understood Jake must have heard from Georgina that she was handling Jared according to plan. She smiled, more relaxed from the way things were going, and turned to the table for a few bites of food. Grandpa Jacob gradually closed his eyes again. The sound of his steady breathing was mixed with a raspy whistling in his lungs. Soon, he seemed to be asleep. Jake let out a long, relieved breath when he saw that Grandpa Jacob was asleep. He felt angry with Jared for being so useless. Why hadn't he hired a nurse that could come tonight? Now, Jake would have to just watch the old man sleeping all night. Just thinking about it already made him bored out of his mind. Jessica had no more appetite. She considered how Jared's performance that evening had really exceeded her expectations, and that perhaps she had underestimated him. Her warning that someone else might become the Nevin family heir in his place seemed to have worked as far as Jake's shaping up. At the same time, Jessica still had no idea who the real Mariana Crawford was. Her plan had been to find her before anyone else got to her, so that she could ensure Georgina assumed her identity. That was the way she could ensure the best future for her daughter. The longer it took to find Mariana, the more bleak this plan seemed. Aligning with Jake and ensuring that he became the Nevin heir might be the best plan they had. Thinking all of it over, Jessica felt a heaviness come over her. She had struggled for security like this for most of her life, and she absolutely did not want Georgina to follow in those same footsteps. She wanted Georgina to be happy, and with status that earned her respect. She deserved to be part of the Crawford family. Jessica believed with her whole heart that Mariana's vacant place in the family must belong to Georgina. It was the best way. Meanwhile, across the ocean in London, the elderly matriarch of the Crawford family, Madame Scarlett Crawford, sat in a large leather chair behind a desk. She wore a classy suit, and her gray hair was meticulously tied into a perfect bun. Her makeup was flawless, but even without it, she was strikingly beautiful with her bright, piercing eyes. Two young men in black suits stood opposite her desk. She looked at the two men and slowly spoke. "This is all you found?" "Yes," the two men said and lowered their heads. Neither the weather outside nor the temperature in the room was hot, but nervous sweat beaded over their temples and foreheads. The powerful energy Madame Crawford radiated in their direction was so intense that they dared not even breathe too loudly. "It's utterly useless." Madame Scarlett Crawford snorted coldly before she rubbed her temples with irritation. Her beautifully manicured nails were painted a deep shade of red. "You're supposed to be some of the best private investigators in the country." "Terribly sorry, madam," the two men apologized. An old man who wore a butler uniform and seemed to be slightly younger than Madame Crawford spoke up. "Madame Crawford, if you really believe that Carolina lied in order to go to New York to look for Mariana, may I make a suggestion?" the butler said. He was very sincere, and he had a history of reliable shrewdness. "Perhaps," Madame Crawford asked as she turned to the butler. "What did you have in mind?" The butler eyed the two men who still stood across from Madame Crawford's desk and pointedly raised his eyebrows. "You two can go." Madame Crawford waved her hand dismissively at the two private investigators. "Right away, madam." The two private investigators nodded nervously and quickly left. They seemed relieved to be dismissed so unscathed. After the two exited, the butler continued, "Madame Crawford, Perhaps you might consider giving the young Miss Carolina another chance and permit her to leave the house again. It seems that she did successfully find some leads on Mariana, even though she was dishonest about her whereabouts. She was more successful at finding any information than the two professional gentlemen who just left. If you let her continue the search, maybe she will be successful. If she finds Mariana, you find Mariana. Madam Crawford's eyes narrowed slightly as she thought it over. All right, arrange for 2 people to follow her. I don't want her on this completely alone. Of course. The butler nodded. I'll send some cucumber water to the study. He turned and left. Madam Crawford sighed lightly and looked out the window. Her vision was not what it once used to be, but she could see the clear, peaceful night outside. The shadows of the trees looked enchanting in the moonlight. Scarlett Crawford had a strong sense that things were not as simple as they seemed, and that they were on the edge of big events. Everyone was shrouded in mystery, but soon the curtain would be lifted. She could feel it. Madam Crawford looked at the bright moon and muttered quietly to herself, "If you are who we think you are, I hope I can outrun death long enough to finally meet you, little Millie." Back in the hollowed halls of the Marshall School, the atmosphere in class had been somewhat strange. Olivia, Millie, Frances, and Morgana had conspicuously been missing from class, and it was all anyone could talk about. Everyone wondered what was going on. Is something wrong? Students whispered among themselves in low voices. 1 or 2 absences here and there was nothing out of the ordinary. Olivia missed school frequently on her own or with a friend or two whenever she needed to travel or work at the park company. But the fact that such a sizable chunk of the friend group were all missing in action warranted extra notice from their other classmates. It's weird that they're not here, especially at such an important time in the semester. One student commented in a hushed voice. Where do you think they might be? I don't know. Why don't we ask Lena? One boy answered. She probably won't tell us anything. Another student shrugged. She's always their loyal secret keeper. Let's ask Sam Feinstein then, a girl suggested. He's part of their group. He might know something. All right, Sam Feinstein might be more loose-lipped than Lena, especially if you laugh at his jokes. Another agreed. The 3 students carefully approached Sam. Sam Feinstein, we have a question for you. What is it? Sam asked as he looked up impatiently and closed the book he had been reading. Unlike many of his classmates, he was actually trying to study. Where are your friends, Olivia and the others? They've been gone for a while. Is something up? The student asked. How should I know? Sam shrugged and glanced at the empty table where Olivia and their missing friends normally sat. He had to admit it was odd that they were all not at school at the same time. He had been so focused on studying that he had not really noticed their absence. But now that he saw they were not there, he had a strange gut feeling. He had been keeping his distance so well that he had not even noticed his friends weren't at school. You're obviously the one who might know since you're their friend and you work with them. The girl laughed. Stop messing around and tell us what's going on. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I really don't know where they are, Sam said, exasperated. The truth was that he felt a little uncomfortable that he did not know where his friends were. Normally, he would know the answer. But things had become weird between them ever since he started dating Saibon, and now he was clearly not in the know. Does it have to do with the plagiarism lawsuit with Confluence? A girl who sat near Sam Feinstein leaned over and whispered, A plagiarism lawsuit? What plagiarism lawsuit? The other students asked, stunned. The girl who brought up the lawsuit clammed up when she saw everyone staring back at her. I heard it from my sister. She's a journalist. She said that recently a smaller company accused Olivia and the others of plagiarizing one of their games. Supposedly they're currently trying to settle or something. They might be in negotiations today. What did you say? Sam asked, stunned. This was the first he had heard of this. Plagiarism. He did remember a potential plagiarism issue from some time ago, but he had been under the impression that the small company in question had actually plagiarized their game and did not know when the story had suddenly turned around. He realized that he really was out of the loop. "It's true," the girl insisted and held her head high. "I heard my sister say it on a phone call. Some company is going after Confluence." Sam's eyes darkened. He immediately stood up without another word, pushed past the students surrounding his desk, and marched over to Lena, who was slumped over, napping on her desk. "Lena," Sam said as he set his hands loudly on the desk. "Huh?" Lena jerked awake from sleeping with her head down on the table. Since Frances was absent, she had the entire desk to herself and took advantage of the sleeping space. She was shocked by Sam's loud approach. "What is it?" "What's going on with the game?" Sam demanded. "The game?" Lena asked groggily. Her mind gradually became clear, and she understood what Sam's question was about. "Yes, the game," Sam repeated. "Didn't I handle this already a long time ago? Is that same company that had threatened trouble before? I thought they agreed to scrap their game they plagiarized from us. How is it suddenly that we plagiarized them? Why didn't I know about any of this?" Lena scratched her head as she mulled over Sam's words. "Well, Olivia said that you didn't want to be involved in this, so she wouldn't let any of us bother you with it." "What kind of nonsense is that?" Sam asked angrily. "It's not bothering me. I'm part of the team, and that means I have also been wrongly accused of plagiarism for no reason. That's a huge deal. I think I deserve to be bothered with it." "That's true," Lena conceded. "But you've also had a lot of stuff going on." Lena felt offended that Sam had suddenly woke her up just to scold her about something that was largely his own fault. He had obviously become too busy dating Sayaban and stopped acting like he cared about what was going on with the game team. Sam faltered at Lena's implication that he was too busy with his girlfriend. He sat down in Frances's empty seat next to her. "Just please explain it to me. Maybe I can help." "Okay, if you insist." Lena yawned. She quickly summarized the entire plagiarism saga. The more Sam heard about it, the more indignant he became. "Someone is obviously trying to set us up. I knew about this No World company all the way back when we started our own game. I made certain that no case for plagiarism would be possible. That small company was just a game studio, but they were all very crafty, especially the leader. He seemed like a normal guy, but he was actually very cunning. Really good at spinning an argument." Sam recalled that it had taken a lot of effort to handle them before they caused trouble, and he worried that the others might not be up to the task. "You don't need to look so worried," Lena sighed. "Olivia has got this under control." "Where are they now?" Sam asked, his face serious. "They are at the park company offices," Lena replied. She took out her phone and showed the message Olivia had sent her with directions to where the negotiations would take place. "Here, this is it." "Can you send that to me?" Sam asked urgently. "Why, what are you going to do?" Lena asked warily. "Just send it, please. We don't have time," Sam exclaimed, his voice going up an entire octave. "You're the one who started distancing yourself lately, and now all of a sudden you're rushing over here and yelling questions at me? You can't just flip-flop so much and expect everyone to cooperate, no questions asked." Lena frowned. Sam scowled but did not say anything. He did feel guilty, but did not know whether he could admit it at that moment. He did not think he should have to apologize for being in love. But it was true that he had neglected the goings-on with the game. "Here, I just forwarded it to you." Lena sighed, resigned. "Thank you," Sam answered. He felt his phone vibrate in his pocket and knew that must be the message. "I'm going to go right now. If the teacher asks later where I am, tell him I left school early today. I will make up the work later." "What are you gonna do?" Lena asked, stunned. Sam did not answer. He hurried back to his seat and fished his wallet out of his backpack as he marched right out of the classroom. Out in the hallway, he saw Sayaban Harney. From the way she looked at him, she seemed to know exactly what he was about to do, even though she did not say a word. Sam did not stop walking. He walked right past Sayaban and only said in a low voice, "I'm sorry." Sayaban's expression did not change when she heard Sam's words. It was almost as if she had expected this to happen. She turned her head and watched Sam walk out of the building. Once he was gone, her eyes narrowed. She thought to herself that if it was anyone other than Sam ruining her plans like this, she would have already killed them. Fortunately for Sam, she really did seem to have a soft spot for him. "Looks like Plan B3 has failed," Saibon said irritably in a low voice. "It's time to move on to Plan D2. Although to anyone who may have been passing by, it might seem as though Saibon were talking to herself. In reality, a man's deep voice responded through the small communication device in her ear. Copy that. In the boardroom at the park company headquarters, Millie and Francis waited nervously for the negotiations to begin. They had arrived on time for their meeting with the No World company to discuss the plagiarism accusation, but so far they were alone. The staff set a fresh pot of coffee on the table. "Thank you," Millie said as she poured herself a cup. "Wow, this coffee is really amazing." Francis smiled at no one in particular. "You sure know how to pick a roast." "Stop flattering me," Olivia responded into her own headset from a private room on the top floor of the building. The microphone she spoke into went directly to the concealed earpieces that Francis and Millie wore. Olivia could see everything in the meeting thanks to the hidden security cameras throughout the boardroom. "If you can stay focused through this entire meeting, that would be awesome," Olivia smiled. "Millie, how are you feeling?" "I'm fine, still getting used to this earpiece," Millie said as she touched her ear. "You'll get used to it and you won't even notice it," Olivia assured her. Francis checked the time on his phone. "It should be about time to start by now." Millie and Francis continued to wait. And wait. There was no sign of any representatives from No World. After what seemed like an eternity, Francis spoke up. "It's already been half an hour." He frowned slightly as he checked the time on his phone again. "Where are they?" "There must be bad traffic or something," Millie said. "It could be a power play, trying to psych us out by showing up late. It can be a very effective method in negotiations," Olivia said into their ears. Millie and Francis looked at each other. They had no choice but to continue to wait. About 10 minutes later, the door to the boardroom finally opened and 3 people from No World entered. Francis was about to stand up politely and greet them, but Millie held his leg to stop him. Millie picked up the pot of coffee and poured herself another cup. Without looking up, Millie said, "I hope you're all sufficiently caffeinated already. It looks like in the 40 minutes we were waiting, we finished all the coffee." The 3 people who walked in were stunned at Millie's bold attitude right out of the gate. Millie confidently looked up at the 3 of them and narrowed her eyes. "Well?" Hello, we are here representing No World," the man in the middle mumbled. He wore a dark gray suit and tie and seemed to be a lawyer. "This is Bert Albertson," he started to say as he gestured to one of his colleagues. Yeah, Millie interrupted and did not wait for introductions. She waved her hand to the other chairs at the table. "Take a seat." The 3 men looked at each other surprised and sat across from Millie and Francis. From her secret room, Olivia smiled. "Nicely done, Millie." Millie smiled suddenly at Olivia's praise. "I apologize that we're a bit late," the lawyer said. "We should not have booked the meeting so early. Who meets at 9 a.m. anymore?" said the man who had been introduced as Bert Albertson. He was a larger man with unkempt hair. Even though all of the men appeared clean, they gave off an air of sleaze. "Sorry, what did you say just now?" Millie asked sharply. Olivia said in a low voice, "Francis, ask him what time he thinks would be better." "What time do you think would have been better to have this meeting?" Francis asked without missing a beat. "Me?" Bert asked in surprise. He glanced at the man who sat on the other side of the lawyer as if he did not expect Francis to ask such a question. Maybe 2 or 3 p.m.? "Fine, we can come back at 3. Millie said curtly as she stood up. "We'll see you then," Francis said as he stood with a smile. Millie and Francis turned to leave the room without hesitation. "Now wait just a minute," the lawyer quickly said. "Mr. Albertson was just joking. We're ready to meet now." The lawyer and Bert looked nervously at the man who still had not spoken yet. Of the three men, he looked the most intimidating. He simply nodded silently in response. Bert and the lawyer looked back at Millie. "I shouldn't run my stupid mouth. Please ignore what I said," Bert offered. "Millie, go ahead and resume when you see fit," Olivia quietly instructed. "Fine, if you want to start this meeting, let's do it now," Millie said and walked back to her seat. She exchanged a glance with Francis. They both understood that the silent man was the leader of the opposition's negotiation. Their tardiness had clearly been to test Millie and Francis, so he must be very calculated. They knew this negotiation was not going to be easy. "The documents that we handed over to Confluence should clearly prove that your game was modeled after our mock-ups," the lawyer began. "What documents?" Millie frowned, then looked like she thought of something. "Oh, you're talking about those hideous design drafts that look nothing like ours? Those documents." The faces of the other men fell. "Whether or not the design drafts we provided are hideous is beside the point, miss," the lawyer said tightly. "Right now, we have enough evidence to prove that this set of designs appeared much earlier than in Confluence's game." "Get him, Millie," Olivia said. "Your company," Millie began to say, then changed her words. "Sorry, I mean your startup." Bert Albertson and the silent man frowned at Millie's subtle dig. "I don't mean to be insulting, but we are speaking the truth. Your startup has produced a total of 9 games in the past 3 years, and all 9 of these games have strong cases for being plagiarized," Millie said matter-of-factly. "We have always worked within the law." The previous silent man finally spoke. His voice remained calm. "That is technically true," Millie conceded as she tapped the table with her fingers. "You have followed the law, but only barely, and until now. Do you really think you can win when you have been so blatantly corrupt?" The man frowned at Millie's question. "We are here today to discuss Confluence's infringement," the lawyer said to Millie. Millie waved him off, keeping her focus on the man who was the clear leader of this trio. "I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name." The man smiled, fox-like at Millie, and leaned forward in his seat. "My name is Ark, Peter Ark," the man said. "I am the owner of No World." "Mr. Ark, we've looked into your company," Millie smiled. "I know you cannot afford a lengthy legal battle. Not like Confluence can." "Are you threatening me?" Peter Ark asked. "Not at all," Millie chuckled as she leaned back slightly. "I'm just stating facts." "Let them know that we know their evidence is bogus and force them to provide more," Olivia directed. "The more they have to admit they don't have any good evidence, the more we can poke holes in their entire case." "That's why we're meeting today," Millie continued. "You know we will refuse to pay the settlement you've proposed, and we know you can't afford to go to court. If you don't have more evidence than what you've provided, there's no way you can win this case." Francis chuckled supportively. Peter Ark narrowed his eyes at Millie and Francis. He felt that something a little strange was going on. When the two of them talked, it seemed as if they responded without even having time to think, almost like they were repeating lines. Suddenly, Mr. Ark realized what was going on. He laughed and took a strange-looking pen out of his pocket. He played with it in his hand for a moment and opened the cap. As soon as he opened the cap, Millie and Francis heard a loud ringing pierce through their earpieces. Millie dropped the cup of water in her hand from the shock of the sound. It fell to the table. "Damn it!" Olivia cursed as she ripped the receiver out of her own ear. "What's wrong?" Morgana asked Olivia, alarmed. "It's a signal jammer." Olivia gritted her teeth and turned off the receiver, gluing her eyes to the screen to see how Millie and Francis would react. She had not expected this twist. Back in the boardroom, Millie and Francis's ears were still ringing from the pain of the signal jammer. Unlike Olivia, they could not remove the receivers from their ears so as not to blow their own cover. They tried their best to seem disturbed, but it was nearly impossible. "This is the latest signal jammer." Peter Ark smiled at Millie and Francis. "I bought it at the Philadelphia Military Affairs Exhibition last month. I think it's very handy. Do you want to take a look at it?" He rolled the pen across the table toward Millie and Francis as he spoke. As the pen got closer to them, the ringing grew louder in their ears. It was so intense that Millie's mind went blank. "No, thank you," Millie said through gritted teeth. She kept a smile on her face. Peter Ark reached for the pen but did not put the cap back on. "All right, let's start this negotiation. This design was released by our company before your game was released," Mr. Ark said. "We can provide the design concept and the source of inspiration for this design if your company asks for it." "That's right," Bert Albertson nodded. "This design is our studio's unique product." "Sorry," Millie managed to say, even though her entire brain felt like it was buzzing. She could barely hear what they were saying. "Could you repeat that, please?" The lawyer and Bert Albertson looked at each other with suspicious expressions. They did not know what had changed, but suddenly Millie and Francis weren't so confident after all. Up in Olivia's secret room, she paced back and forth anxiously. She had no access to hear what was going on in the negotiation room at all since the signal jammer had ruined their connection. She wanted to go down there herself, but she knew if she showed up in the boardroom, it would be a loss. These people were out to get her specifically. It was best she stay as far away as possible. "Olivia, do you need a rest? That signal jammer was brutal," Morgana said. "Morgana, I need you to go downstairs to the negotiation room right away," Olivia said urgently. Morgana nodded dutifully. "And once I get there, what do I do?" Olivia hesitated. Morgana was not the person to handle this negotiation. If anything, the danger was that Morgana might just annihilate everyone in the room as soon as she got frustrated. That would be disastrous. "Go and tell them to stop the negotiation. Then tell Millie and Francis to come back here immediately." In the boardroom, Millie and Francis struggled to hang on. The piercing sound was torture to their ears and their heads pounded, but they couldn't take their earpieces out without admitting they were being fed tips from Olivia. Peter Ark seemed to be deliberately drawing out the negotiations to make them suffer. Millie and Francis could barely focus on what was happening in the room, let alone respond to anything Peter Ark or the lawyer said without Olivia. Suddenly, the doors to the boardroom burst open and someone walked in. "Sorry I'm late. There was a traffic jam on 5th Avenue. Everyone turned around, stunned to see who had just entered. "Sam Feinstein!" Millie and Francis exclaimed. "Now where were we?" Sam Feinstein asked breezily as he waltzed into the boardroom. He tried not to smirk as he saw each of the men across from him let their mouths drop open, completely stunned. Sam sat down next to Francis and Millie and gave them a pleasant smile. They had all faced off with Sam in business meetings and legal negotiations before, and they knew how formidable he was. None of Sam's friends would have known it before they saw it happen, but he was fiercely powerful in a meeting, always ready to deliver a verbal or written smackdown with preparation and facts. Bert Albertson sputtered, We didn't think you were coming today." Sam shrugged, unbothered. "I know, I've already apologized. Since I am already arriving so late, don't waste any more time on me. Let's get right to the point." Bert cleared his throat, hoping to regain control for his team. "You should know what the point of this meeting is already." Sam nodded. "Is it to formally discuss the matter of your studio deleting your game and publicly apologizing for accusing us of plagiarism when it is in fact your company that plagiarized? We have already talked about this before, and I think I've been very clear about this matter." Millie and Francis beamed at Sam, almost giddy. Watching him basically school all these men with his words was delightful. Their lawyer leaned forward, his cheeks visibly reddening. "I think you are mistaken about the situation. Now we can provide evidence that is legally sufficient to prove—" Sam interrupted the lawyer. "You don't have to tell me about the evidence. I don't know what or who changed your mind on this matter, but I do know what we had agreed upon before." Peter Ark shoved an elbow in front of the lawyer sitting next to him, frustrated. "Yeah, you've been saying that's what you think from before. But we now have the evidence we need to prove our innocence and that Confluence Technology has in fact been the one to copy our game. We're innocent now." Sam nodded at Peter, still smiling placidly, even though his words were like knives. "So you can deny what we settled on before, right? You say that you are innocent now. What does that mean? Are you admitting that you were dirty before?" At this barrage of words from Sam, the three men sitting facing him were stunned. Their brains were all scrambled to regain any sort of footing, and Sam knocked them back each time. Sam narrowed his eyes at all of those men, his face full of suspicion. Since it's a sudden change from what we discussed before, I have to doubt the authenticity of the evidence you provided. You can understand why I would feel that way, right? The lawyer adjusted his glasses, raising a finger in protest. Our evidence has already been appraised and approved by a judge in court, a real court, with a real judge. Sam threw up his hands, his eerie, friendly expression unflappable. Oh, you guys are experts in this kind of thing, I'm not. But we all know you are fighting for whatever outcome would be the greatest benefit to your studio. As you could expect, I'm also doing my best to get the greatest possible benefit for my team. Our goals do not intrinsically conflict. We just need to understand each other. Bert Albertson and the lawyer looked to Peter Ark expectantly. Peter Ark looked at Sam with a displeased expression. He knew that every time they met this Sam Feinstein, nothing good ever came out of it for him. So, young man, you mean… What I mean is very clear. Sam jumped in. You don't need to emphasize to me what evidence you have. Not to mention the certification by a court, whether it is a real court or not. Or talk about the compensation you think you're owed or whatever. You only need to do one thing, and that is to dispel my doubts. Peter Ark raised his nose indignantly. We do not have to do any such thing about your doubts. As long as our evidence is submitted to the court and approved by the judge, your doubts do not matter. Sam laughed lightly. Perhaps you have the law on your side, but what about your morality? What about the fans and commentators online and all of our peers in the gaming industry? In the best case scenario for you, where let's say you do win, we will still have the largest following of gamers in the world. One word against you, and they will destroy your reputation on social media. As Sam finished speaking, the three men across from them had stopped talking. They had nothing to say in response. Sam shrugged. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Gamers, as an online community, are generally good at letting things go, aren't they? Sam knew the sarcasm in his tone had landed with these three men. Peter Ark's face went white. Sam laughed again. But if you hadn't thought about this scenario, you wouldn't have been sitting here today, right? Peter clapped his hands on his knees. This negotiation ends here. I know there's no benefit in continuing to argue with the likes of you. His memory was vivid with the many times they had exchanged blows with Sam Feinstein. Sam already knew all of their weaknesses and strengths. They had heard from their secret source ahead of time that Sam would not interfere in this current matter, and that was the only reason they decided to go up against Olivia Johnson's company. They were each privately angry and flabbergasted. Who would have guessed that such a powerful source would be wrong, and Sam Feinstein would appear at this meeting? Sam stood up first. All right, I hope we do get to enjoy a more pleasant negotiation with you gentlemen next time. Peter stood. Same here. His grim face turned away from Sam, and he was about to leave the room. Wait a minute. Sam called for Peter to stop as the other two men were preparing to follow him. Sam picked up a pen from the table that had been between them and replaced its cap. You left something behind, and this one looks like a beauty. Peter glanced at Millie and Francis, but all three of their expressions were unreadable. Thank you, he intoned to Sam, taking it from him. He angrily thought that if they could have settled the matter before Sam Feinstein came, then none of this would have happened. Sam gave a humble nod as the three men left. Goodbye, he called out cheerfully to them. The door closed behind the men. Francis and Millie immediately removed the receivers from their ears and sighed with relief. Francis then looked at Sam Feinstein in awe. He shook his head. Phew, man, Sam, if you had not come into this meeting, I think I might have died right here at this table. Sam smiled genuinely back at Francis. Oh, you don't need to exaggerate. He looked at the receivers they had pulled out of their ears. What are those? Nothing. Millie shook her head, quickly becoming exhausted as she came down from the adrenaline rush that had been pumping through her veins for that whole meeting. She rubbed her eyes, then frowned at Sam. So you came just like that? Sam held his hands open wide. I know, right? The door of the room opened. Morgana poked her head in. Olivia asked you all to go upstairs. She saw what happened on the screen and she wants to discuss. Also, she ordered a lot of really amazing food, and I wasn't allowed to start without you. So hurry up. Sam threw his arm around Francis's shoulder. I am feeling a bit peckish, I suppose. He smiled as a grin spread across Francis's face, and the two of them walked out. Morgana followed behind Millie, grabbing at her arm and whispering to her. Olivia originally sent me to stop the meeting, but when we saw Sam Feinstein head into this room, I didn't know what to do. When I went back to ask Olivia, she just smiled. I think she's happy to see him. Millie smiled. I think so too. She linked arms with Morgana. Come on, let's go celebrate. The group of friends gathered in Olivia's office. Olivia urged them all to sit and make themselves comfortable, hydrate, and decompress from the stressful meeting. The previous matter with Saibon seemed to have disappeared. As they were talking, eating, and laughing with their friends, all of them felt like things were exactly like they'd been before. Though rather than feeling like nothing had changed, it felt as though this group of friends had grown even closer from their recent turbulent experiences. Olivia smiled at her friends, happy to be reunited with them and a happy victory for them as people and for Confluence as a company. But her heart sank as she watched Sam joking and catching up with Francis, Millie, and Morgana. She knew he was still firmly in Saibon's pocket. Sam returning to Confluence today was a sign that Olivia had won a battle against Saibon Harney, but she knew there was still an entire war ahead of her. Are you guys all right? That was a lot to deal with. Olivia asked Millie and Francis. Millie nodded. I'm totally fine. At the time, it was very uncomfortable to live through, but now that it's over, I feel like it was awesome. I'm just about done eating, so I'm ready to go back to school. Francis smiled at Millie. I feel the same way. I'm also fine and ready to go back to school and have a normal day for once. Olivia felt relieved. She had been so worried when the earpieces stopped working that she was putting her friends through something unbearable. But they were resilient and cheerful as always. Olivia's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and saw that it was her mom. She picked up. Hi, Mom. Victoria's voice was weak. Olivia, something happened, she rasped. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. What? What's wrong, Mom? What happened? From her end of the line in their family apartment, Victoria's eyes fluttered when she tried to recall. I don't know, I fainted and I don't remember anything. I just knew I should call you. She frowned, straining, trying to remember any details. I only remember hearing the doorbell ring. Panic vibrated through Olivia's brain. That's good, Mom, then what else? Victoria nodded, the events coming to her in hazy pieces. I looked out the peephole, but that felt like it was just a second ago. I woke up sitting on the sofa, and it seems that an hour and a half has passed. Olivia's eyes widened. She gulped, her throat dry as sandpaper. And you don't remember anything about what happened in between during that hour and a half? Victoria shook her head. I don't, honey, I'm sorry. No, don't be sorry. Olivia's voice nearly started to tremble. She was terrified, but did her best to keep her terror private, not wanting to alarm her mom any further. It's okay, Mom, don't be afraid. I'm really happy you called me. I'll be right there. Victoria agreed, letting herself be comforted by Olivia jumping into action. Olivia turned to Millie, Francis, and Sam, who had all been listening to this with grave concern. There seems to be something going on at home. You guys head back to school. Morgana and I are going to go home and check on my mom for a while. Okay, Millie replied while they all nodded. Sam frowned. Be careful. If you think there's any need at all, even the slightest bit, call the police immediately. Olivia nodded, though she privately knew that this matter was not so simple. Morgana nearly slammed her utensils down onto the coffee table and stood up. Then let's go. If Victoria is in trouble, I cannot eat one more mouthful of lunch. Olivia almost smiled, knowing that this was an extreme measure by Morgana's standards. Olivia and Morgana took a car over, instructing the driver to get them home as quickly as possible. As they approached the front door, Olivia checked the lock. She frowned, surprised there was no traces of damage. Olivia opened the door and tentatively called out, Mom? Mom, are you there? Olivia! Victoria immediately stood up from the sofa. Her face was pale and her eyes were completely bloodshot. She looked startled, her breathing shallow, her expression wild. Olivia quickly walked to her side. "Mom, are you all right?" Victoria nodded. I'm fine, but that 1.5 hours really disappeared all of a sudden. I don't feel anything at all. It was like I blinked and poof. This feeling is terrifying." Olivia's face filled with concern, wanting to validate her mom's fear but not add to it. "That does sound scary, but you don't need to be afraid anymore. Let's sit down." Olivia gently guided Victoria back to the couch and turned to Morgana. "Could you bring her a glass of water?" "Of course," Morgana replied and hurried to the kitchen. She loved Victoria and felt a strong allegiance to her. It was extremely upsetting to see her so vulnerable. Olivia put her hand on her mom's arm as Victoria sank back into the couch, looking dazed. "Mom, do you remember what you saw last when you looked through the peephole?" "Last?" Victoria repeated. She carefully recalled. "A green light. It was like a flash." Olivia frowned. "A green light?" Victoria nodded. "Yes, I just opened the peephole and took a look. I saw this green light. It filled my eyes completely. Then I knew nothing." Morgana hurried into the room and placed the glass in Victoria's hands. "That sounds like hypnosis. Victoria, drink this." Olivia felt like there was something fishy about the whole situation. Hypnosis? She thought for a moment. "Morgana, hang out here with my mom for a minute. I'm going to check the apartment to see if there's anything missing." "Okay," Morgana replied, sitting on the other side of Victoria. She reached out and held Victoria's hand. "Victoria, don't be afraid. Nobody is going to dare to do anything to you with us around to protect you." Olivia entered her bedroom and found that her stash of expensive purses, her designer clothes, and her jewelry was still there. She was about to leave to head to another room when she had a thought. Feeling that something was amiss, she stopped and squatted down to touch a small cabinet door. The cabinet door had been broken a while back by Morgana when she was playing games, carelessly walking around with her eyes glued to the screen. When she had left home that morning, Olivia remembered that the lock was pushed down. But right now, it was pushed up. Olivia frowned and looked back down at the hallway to the living room. When she heard that Morgana was still chatting with Victoria, Olivia gently closed the door and turned on the computer. She booted it up and accessed the hidden security system that Chris had set up for her. She got in with her facial scan. After waiting for it to load and selecting a file, she clearly saw 3 people entering her room. They looked very big and strong, like professional bodyguards or mercenaries. They carefully looked around her room for something, and their movements were fast and gentle without any mistakes or errant movements. Olivia frowned. What are they looking for? She wondered aloud. She did not have any clue. They found nothing and left seemingly empty-handed. After watching the video, Olivia closed down the security system on her computer and returned to the living room. Victoria looked nervously at Olivia. "How is everything? Is something missing?" Olivia hesitated. "I do think it was a thief, but they didn't find any of our valuables." Olivia knew it was most likely someone who was one of her enemies targeting her specifically, not just some thief after her possessions. But she did not share that because she didn't want her mom to worry any more than she already did. "Oh my God!" Victoria covered her mouth with her hand. "A thief got in here." "I know, but they didn't take anything. We might have been targeted because our door is a little old. I'll get a high-security door installed as soon as I can." Victoria frowned. "But I still don't understand. So they're a thief who made me lose time with a green light?" Olivia shrugged. "Maybe it's a young thief who knows some hypnosis. Since the trigger was a green light, we can replace the people with one that filters out color. That way, it will be safe." Victoria seemed uncertain, not quite buying it. Will it really work?" "It will work," Olivia nodded. She was sure that those people would not come back after finding nothing and employ the exact same method. She would also find a reliable person in the Nether group to protect Victoria from then on. Victoria, unable to find fault in that, gradually relaxed. Oh, so should we call the police then? Olivia shook her head. There's no need to call the police. Our family is pretty well known, so I think this information would get out if we did. It would also not be good if someone else used that information to get revenge on us for turning to law enforcement. All right then, Victoria nodded. What a world. There is no peace, is there? Olivia shook her head in agreement, sighing. Not right now, no. Olivia was perturbed. She wondered silently to herself, who exactly has their eyes on something in my bedroom, and what do they want? Morgana looked at Olivia, curious about what she had found. The tall, broad mercenary holding the phone trembled. We couldn't find it. Saibon's lazy drawl was filled with impatience through their call. You really are useless. Aren't you all supposed to be professionals? The two other large men besides the mercenary looked nervous. I'm really sorry, he muttered, not used to apologizing, but not knowing what else to say. Saibon sighed. There's really no point in keeping such useless people alive. The expressions of the three mercenaries instantly changed. They looked around in a panic when suddenly, a bomb went off just behind the men.